Hello people of YouTube, it's Deepak here, and welcome to DCS World 2.5.6 and Razbam Sim's AV8B Harrier module. Welcome to Tutorial 12, Defensive Systems. Today we're going to go over all the different ways in which the Harrier can defend itself in combat. That includes a look at the RWR, or Radar Warning Receiver, the countermeasures that the aircraft carries in the form of chaff and flares, the DECM pod, which is an external ECM emitter that the Harrier can carry, the Sidearm AGM-122 anti-radiation missile, which can be used against surface-to-air missile sites, or actually any kind of ground radar, and the Sidewinder, good old Sidewinder, AIM-9M, which is the version that the Harrier can carry, a heat-seeking air-to-air missile. So, just quickly, let's have a little look at the loadout that we have today. We can see here that on the left-hand outer pylon, it's all over the place. There we go, that's the Sidewinder. Let's get ourselves down and get a closer look at that. Everybody's probably familiar with the Sidewinder. This version is the AIM-9M. That's an all-aspect heat-seeking missile, so it can attack. It doesn't necessarily have to attack targets from behind, where their exhaust is the hottest, or most visible, and it has approximately a 9 nautical mile range. Now, you're going to see a bit later, however, that's a little bit difficult for us to determine because we don't have a radar, so we're relying on visually figuring out the range. So when it comes to the Harrier, I would say the closer the better when you're launching these. And if I make my way over to the right-hand outer station, you'll see that we have the AGM-122 Sidearm here. Now, the Sidearm actually is originally a Sidewinder. They started off life as AIM-9C Sidewinders, which are pretty early versions of the Sidewinder, and these were originally designed as semi-active radar-guided Sidewinders. I believe this particular model was considered ineffective and they were taken out of service, but they originally required a radar lock to home. They don't have a heat seeker. So after the AIM-9C was taken out of service, these missiles were redesignated AGM-122 and somewhat rejigged in order to work as SEAD missiles, basically, anti-radiation missiles for use against ground radars. And in that role, they have pretty similar characteristics to the normal Sidewinder. They have a maximum range of about 9 nautical miles. Of course, that's going to depend on your airspeed and altitude at launch. And they also produce a very similar kind of tone. So there's not that much in the way of symbology in your HUD and so on. You basically point the nose of your aircraft towards the SAM site, wait until you hear a tone, and then you launch it. And so, of course, if there are multiple radars in close proximity, it's going to be a little bit hard to figure out quite which one you fired at. But this is a short-range missile really intended for self-defense, so that probably doesn't matter too much. On the centerline station here, in the place where we would sometimes be carrying the Lightning II, today we're carrying the DECM pod. And this is a active jammer which is capable of self-defense of the Harrier, and it works in pulse Doppler mode, so it can jam airborne radars, and it also has continuous wave emission capability, which also allows it to block surface-to-air missile systems. Now, what of course is actually going to happen, and this is kind of an old pod and it's not particularly effective, but the actual effect it's going to have is going to cut down the range at which enemy radars will get a lock. It's going to confuse them enough that you can get a little bit closer before they get a shot off at you, basically. It doesn't do that much apart from that. Now, when it comes to the RWR, we have sensors for detecting radar emissions on the nose, tail and wingtips of the aircraft. This gives us a full 360-degree view. However, it doesn't give us that much elevation, so targets below and above us will not be detected. Those are kind of dead zones for the radar warning receiver. So be aware of this if you're maneuvering. If you roll the aircraft over to try and evade a missile, you might think that the missile is no longer tracking you because you no longer have RWR information for that missile, but what in fact you've probably done is just put it in your blind spot. So be aware of that. And in the chaff and flare dispensers, so you can see these on the tail of the aircraft. We have 4 on the upper surface of the aircraft, seen here as these kind of waffle patterns, and we have 2 on the underside, which you can barely see just behind the speed brake there. These can be loaded with different pods of countermeasures. If we go into our knee board here, we can actually see this section at the bottom, ECM dispenser pod it calls it. So top, front, left, we've got 30 chaff. We could change that by holding left shift, left alt and pressing 1. No, sorry, left shift, yeah, sorry, right shift, right alt. I'm wrong here. Right shift, right alt, and then number 1. We can toggle that between flares and chaff, and we can do that for all of these. The standard loadout is that you're going to have 60 chaff total in the top front dispensers, and then all the other dispensers, both top and bottom, are going to be flares. And that's a pretty good loadout, to be honest. Yep, and of course, when it comes to their purpose, chaff is used against targets tracking you with radar. Flares are used against threats tracking you with heat-seeking missiles. And so in most cases, the flares are going to be more useful if somebody's up close to you. So what I'm going to do next is start up the aircraft, and then I'll go over some of the standard symbology in the RWR and the other systems. Be right back. Okay, and so you join us back in the cockpit after startup, and I'm going to focus down on the right-hand MPCD just now, and the controls that are just at the side of that on the right. If I go to main menu and choose EW, EW is for electronic warfare, and this is the main page that you're going to use for looking at the countermeasures and the radar warning receiver. I'm just going to tilt this up a little bit so I get these lights as well. So the things that we're interested in here are the right MPCD, the electronic warfare controls, and we have RWR lights up here as well. So currently expendables are off, radar warning receiver is off. We can turn the radar warning receiver on using this top knob. Anything beyond the on position is on, and then we can turn it further up to adjust the volume of the tones that it will generate. I'm just going to actually, I wonder if I turn it off again and then turn it back on quickly. It didn't do it. So I was going to explain some of the tones that we just heard there. The doot sound, that kind of single tone, it makes that sound whenever one of the targets shown moves between one of the layers, one of the rings. And actually I'm going to pause this very quickly, and I'm going to quickly go over these rings. So these rings don't tell you the range of the emitting radar. What they tell you is it's kind of a threat level, in effect. So it's a combination of power of emission and the priority of that particular target. So it's going to vary based on what type of radar it's detected. So the outermost ring, this one here with the dashes, in fact where all of the current detected threats are, this is called the non-lethal ring. So stuff in this ring is either just a surveillance radar, so it has no capability to actually attack you, and actually in the case of this S here, that's exactly what that is, that's a surveillance radar, or it's so far away and so weak that there's no possibility that it's going to engage you. The middle ring here, this is called the lethal ring. So once stuff moves into the lethal ring, that means that it's probably a bit closer to you, and it probably could either attack you immediately, or it's about to be in range to attack you. And then we have the innermost ring here, and this is called the critical ring. And inside the critical ring, these are emitters which are almost certainly actively engaging you. They've probably locked you up, they might even be about to or have launched a missile. And then, so the other thing that you're going to get, of course, is each one of these has identifying marks on them. So you can see a few of these have got chevrons on the top. That means that these are airborne radars. These are aircraft. This S here has no chevron. That means that it's a ground radar. So this is a ground-based search radar that's detected us. The 15 here is actually an F-15, so of course that's an aircraft. And in actual fact, this is a friendly, but the system has no way of determining whether radars are friendly or not, so it displays all of them. If something is a ship, it will actually display like a little pan symbol underneath, so that's how you know that it's a ship. If it's a brand new detected target, emitter, sorry, you may have noticed when I turned the RWR on, they all had little hats on them, little semicircular hats above. That's a new emitter, so it's just been detected. And that will normally be accompanied by what's called the waterfall tone. So it's like a diddly tone. And that you hear that tone whenever a new emitter appears, or whenever an emitter disappears. The doot tone that you hear is whenever an emitter changes. So generally it's going to be when it changes through the different rings. Those are the main ones. Also, actually, most of this information is also repeated up on the HUD. So let's have a quick look at the HUD for a moment. Now we're currently in VRest mode. In that mode it's decluttered. If I go to nav mode... Oh, I can't while I'm paused. There we go, we're in nav mode now. And you'll see that the same information on the EW page is also appearing here on the HUD. Let's zoom down. Oh, you can't really zoom the HUD, can you? So let's pause that for one moment, and we're going to have a quick discussion of these symbols as well. Now, of course, on the HUD we don't have rings, so the threat ring that the emitter is in is actually determined by what's called the lollipop. So you'll see that across the bottom here we've got a bunch of short lollipops. So short lollipops mean that they are non-lethal, or they're in the non-lethal ring. Dashed lollipops, like this F-16 here, these are lethal. And actually, luckily for us, this F-16 is a friendly. So he, as you can see here, is in the middle ring, and he has a dashed line. Now, and that's a longer line than the short lollipops. If that dashed line became a solid line, he would then be in the critical ring, in the middle ring. So we then really need to start paying attention to him. If a chevron appeared on the end of his long line, that means that he's locked us up. So of course at that stage we're really paying attention. And if it's a long lollipop with a chevron and it starts flashing, then we're in real trouble because he's launched at us. He's launched a radar-guided missile. And actually the lock would be accompanied by a pulsing tone. And then if he's launched and he's flashing, there will also be a fast pulsing tone, and that's really to get our attention. And then the last thing to look at down here with the RWR is the RWR lights. So of course a lot of the time you might not have the EW page up, so there are a series of lights here to let you know what is going on, even when you're not looking at the EW page or the HUD. So the top one is SAM, and that's in the event that a SAM system has locked you up. There is also CW for continuous wave. That means that you're being scanned. If that flashes, you've been launched at by a SAM. AI is an airborne intercept radar. That basically means an aircraft. So when it's on like this, an aircraft is scanning you, or is in lethal. If it starts flashing, you've been launched against. And in the bottom one is AAA, and this one is specifically against anti-air artillery, so guns, radar-guided gun systems, and it operates in the same way. It illuminates when you're being tracked and flashes when you've been locked up. So next thing, we have the expendables switch. So as here, we can see expendables are currently off. Normally we're going to flip that into automatic. And what automatic means is that the dispensers, either top or bottom, will be automatically selected based on the type of threat, and it will cycle through them. You also have the option to say up, and that means that we want priority to the upwards firing launchers. So it will use the upwards firing launchers as much as possible until they're expended, and then it will use the bottom ones. Down is the same, but prioritizing the downward firing ones. RWR is currently not implemented. In the real aircraft, RWR would mean that the programs that you've loaded into your RWR will control which dispenser to use. I would normally leave it on automatic. What automatic is tending to do is to cycle between up and down, and that's probably the best one to leave it in most of the time. When the dispensers or the expendables are turned on, you then have confirmation here of how many you have. So chaff 60, flares 120, and in the mode S for single. So you have a countermeasures dispense switch. It's a 4-way switch. Pushing it forward dispenses flares, and just now because they're in single, that means each time I push forward on the countermeasure switch, I'll dump a single flare. Aft is to dispense chaff. Again, it's in single mode, and if I push it to the right, it will dispense both simultaneously. If I go into prog for programs, I can control the all program, the chaff program, and the flare program. I won't go into this in too much detail just now, but you would have options on the ODU and the UFC to change these programs. So the current program for chaff is that we're going to do 1 burst of single, and we're able to do that every 0.1 seconds. That's not particularly interesting. Flare program, basically the same. Dump a single flare in intervals of 1. And in the all program, you can program what happens when you push that switch as well. We're not going to go over that today, but that's how you would access that. And then you have modes down the right hand. Oh, that's the hat. That's a new emitter. You have modes down the right hand side that control the RWR. Some of these work and some of them don't. Currently, there's no offset mode, there's no primary mode, and there's no built-in test. You can, in fact, enable limits, though. And what limit is going to do is it's only going to show you the highest priority targets. The problem with the RWR is that most of the time it's just telling you about friendlies that are sitting in the non-lethal ring. You probably don't care about them most of the time, so turn on the limit and you're only going to get interesting stuff. Okay, and then the last thing on the right-hand side here, the ECM switch. So, flipping that to standby will warm up the pod and get it ready for usage. You have a series of lights actually down here on the main warning panel telling you what the pod is doing. The next position is bit for built-in test. You can actually run the built-in test to confirm that your pod is working. And you should get status lights down here once the built-in test completes. I'm not 100% sure whether or not the built-in test is simulated at this time. So we'll move on. We then have receive mode for the pod. What this means is that the pod will remain in standby until it receives radar emissions of a set kind of threat level, and then it will immediately start jamming. And you can actually see that currently the pulse Doppler jam has turned on. So that's in response to the airborne radars that we're currently receiving. There's also a CW jam light down here that can come on in the event it thinks that that's necessary. And the last mode is repetition. And in repetition, it will just fire the pulse and the CW jammer continuously. And so if you don't want to wait for somebody to be considered a threat, you can just leave it on all the time. Just now, I'm going to put it back into standby, because we're not needing to use that right now. Okay, so I'm now going to get the aircraft airborne, and I'm going to fly towards a SAM site, and we will demonstrate what that looks like on the RWR, and I'll also demonstrate firing the sidearm. Okay, so you join me inbound the range, where I have placed an SA-8 SAM site at the southern bomb circle, and we're going to see what happens here. I've put the RWR into limit mode. Oh, there we go, there's the 8. So in actual fact, let's active pause there just for a moment. With limit mode on, we're only actually seeing stuff that's interesting, so stuff that is in the lethal or critical rings for the most part. If I turn the limit off, you can see that we are in fact detecting this SA-8 site, but he's got a short lollipop, so he's very much out of range. We're going to continue inbound, and I'm going to show you what it looks like as we go through the different rings and as he becomes more and more threatening. But before we do that, I'm going to get the sidearm ready so that we'll be ready to launch against that radar site. And also keep in mind, we're actually really lucky here because I have a waypoint in that location, so I have the range. Keep in mind that the sidearm is only going to be able to go about 9 nautical miles, so yeah, we need to get close. And it might be that we can't even launch against him. We might need to get too close, and in those cases you would need to use ground clutter to keep him out of the ability to actually launch at you. So let's go menu and stores, and here we can see that we've got our 9M Sidewinder on the left outer, so that's station 1, and we've got our sidearm SA showing on the right outer pylon there. Now you'll notice that we have profiles for the J82L, which I've got on the middle pylons, and the gun. There's no profile for the Sidewinder or for the Sidearm. These weapons, well, the Sidewinder is a special case because you actually access that using what's called the air-to-air switch, and I'll go over that a little bit later. The Sidearm is not integrated with the avionics of the Harrier. It's such a basic weapon that it doesn't have any profile. So we actually have to select it using the old-fashioned armament control panel down here. So we're going to go air-to-ground mode, and we're going to just choose Station 7. Because I know that there's a sidearm on that station, and you can see it gets boxed, and it's now ready to use. And mode is AGM automatically, which is an air-to-ground missile. That's the same mode that Mavericks would use. So let's bring this out a little bit and have a quick look at the HUD, and you can see that we have 1x SA, and it's flashing. Now the reason it's flashing is because we don't have the Master Arm on. Let's go, Master Arm on, and now it's happy. And the only symbology we get is a bore sight symbol for the missile. We have this circle and these lines, and that's all we're going to get. Now, one thing that I need to do very quickly is make sure that the tone is going to be loud enough. You have controls for the tone for both the Sidewinder and for the Sidewinder and for the voice messaging system. I'm just going to turn both of them up here just now. There we go. Yeah, so this inner one, this controls the tone for the Sidewinder and for the Sidearm. I'm not going to have it too high because it's going to get annoying. And in this outer one, this controls your bitching Betty, basically. So, let's come back up to here. So we now have that low tone. That low tone, that just tells us the missile is working. It's going to go to a high tone when it has enough radar energy to lock and to be good to launch. So let's come out of active pause, and I'm going to put the system back into limit, so we're not going to see that SA8 until it moves into the lethal ring. And if I move towards this SA8 and actually point my reticle at it, yeah, just now it's doing nothing. So we're far too far away. The missile is not getting enough energy. And in most cases, it's really not going to get enough energy until we get locked up, which is a bit terrifying. One thing to note is that it's not the pickle button to launch this missile, it is the trigger. So it's the gun trigger that you use to actually get this off the rail. So we're going to continue inbound until something exciting happens. We're at 19 miles. And you can see just now that F-16, well, we've got two F-16s actually just off to the right. One is showing as lethal, and one is showing as... Sorry, one is showing as lethal, one is showing as critical, in fact. We've got a dotted lollipop and a long lollipop. So that's what we're waiting to see with this SA-8. 16 miles. I'm going to go autopilot off, so I'm ready to evade, just in case I need to. And this is a radar-guided sight, so I'm going to want to dispense chaff if he launches at me, and that's countermeasures switch aft. You might just about see the chaff coming off. Yeah, and I'm also going to put my ECM into continuous just now, just to give me a better chance of getting close to him. Okay, 11 miles. Yeah, he's still in the non-lethal. Oh shit, he's just locked us up. Right, we got a tone. Sidearm is away, and I am out. So we're going to put him... Ah, you see, he just went into our dead zone. He is actually still locking us. Let's put the limit off, so we know he's still there. Yeah, he's not considered within lethal anymore. Let's go back towards him again, because hopefully that sidearm is going to take him out. He is an armoured vehicle, so it might not. There you go, he's locked us up again. Let's see if we can get a launch, and then you can see what that's like. So this slow tone is a lock. And you see he's flashing on my RWR there. This could well be where you see me die, but that's okay. 6 miles. and he just dropped off. And I would suspect that's because the sidearm just hit him. So there you go. It's a very, very simple weapon, but it can be effective. I did actually take out that SA-8 before he had a chance to kill me. So, okay, I'm now going to get set up to show you the air-to-air modes of the aircraft in a dogfight. Be right back. Okay, you rejoin me, and I've passed into enemy territory so that I can demonstrate the air-to-air modes using the air-to-air switch. But first, let's have a little look at selective jettison, because of course if you find yourself in an air-to-air combat situation, you're going to need to dump any excess weight. So we switch the selective jettison switch to stores, and we choose the stations that we want to jettison. So in this case I'm going to dump the fuel tanks, which are on the inners, and I'm also going to select the middle pylons, which have bombs. There we go. That's a lot better. Now we're a bit lighter. And there's an enemy aircraft just up there above me. We're going to see if we can go and get him. But first, I'm going to demonstrate the air-to-air switch. So, you have an air-to-air switch, which can be pushed forward, aft, and depressed. Forward is going to give you Sidewinder in bore sight mode. So that means I need to put that circle on the target and pull the trigger. Aft puts it into a mode called Seam, and Seam mode is going to roll the seeker and give me a slightly wider angle at which I can pick up the enemy target. And then Depress is going to put me in gun mode. And in gun mode I get a gun cross and this kind of funky gun line is going to show me where my rounds are going to hit depending on the range. So for now we're going to go Seam mode. And something to note is that you can either just put this on the target until you get tone and then fire, or you can put it on the target and tap uncage, and your weapon will continue to track that target as time goes on. I'm going to accelerate towards this guy because he's probably flying away from me right now. And keep in mind this is an all-aspect version of the Sidewinder. Oh, there we go, we have tone. I'm going to press uncage, and that means that the missile is going to continue to track him. Now I'm quite certain that we are far too far away to make this shot, so let's get a bit closer to him first. And this, of course, is something you would only really do for self-defense. This version of the Harrier is absolutely not a dogfighting machine. And as I said before, no radar means that we have no ranging information at all. We can only range to the target visually. And I've lost that heat signature. Let's get a bit closer. I should also say that in my opinion the gun is not useful in air-to-air unless you practice a lot and become pretty good with it. Because it's too low a rate of fire, to be honest, and you don't have a radar-computed gun sight in this. He's pretty close. I think we're good for a shot at about this range, so I'm going to pull the trigger. Fox 2. He's manoeuvring, and he's dumping flares, so he might get away with that one. And that was the only Sidewinder I was carrying. I'm going to switch it to guns, just so I can probably quickly demonstrate how awful the guns are for this purpose. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's defeated that. Oh, that's me pulling my maximum angle of attack there, that's what that tone is. And the likelihood of me being able to get a gun solution on this guy is very low. The Harrier is not a dogfighting machine. I'll pull the trigger though so you get the idea. Oh, there he is. There he is. Oh, but I'm bleeding off energy so quickly. And this is me at full throttle. So I have no chance of taking this guy out. This is a MiG-23, by the way. Yeah, in fact, he's getting away from me in level flight, so this is not going to happen. In any case, you get the idea, and you can come out of the air-to-air mode by simply pressing the nav push button again. And that is how you employ Sidewinders and the gun in air-to-air mode. And in fact, that concludes the tutorial for defensive systems in the Harrier. I hope you all enjoyed that. As always, please subscribe and like and comment. That's a really big help to the channel. And I'll see you all next time.